I get new product, I read the whole can because there's so many energy drinks or alcohol drinks that look like each other,
Yes.
so. I don't think the control board would fall for that. Oh, that's alcohol. I thought that was an energy drink. We don't care. Here's your ticket. Yeah, here's your ticket.
Yes.
Four Loko on 2000.
They don't.
It's not yet.
No.
It's not.
Good evening. Welcome to the study session, June 27th, 2023. Donna, we do a roll call, please.
I will. Councilmember Bode.
Here.
Councilmember Sherman. Here. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Here.
Mayor Nesco.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Schmidt.
Here.
Councilmember McDowell. Present. And Councilmember Peterson. Here.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
Public Works Director Jay Harris has an update about street standards.
Yeah, good evening. This is sort of meeting, it's probably number 3, because I gave one a long time ago, but in recent memory, this is meeting number 2. Jay Harris, for Public Works Director. Good evening, Council. So tonight I want to talk to you more. I'm being a little more precise in the last meeting. I sort of threw out like a menu, and the mayor had mentioned, hey, can we just sort of deal with one thing at a time here? So I sort of pared it back to just a couple discussions tonight. The goal is to adopt an engineering design standards manual, probably some municipal code revisions also, that allow our staff to issue permits to a developer and be able to tell them exactly what the frontage improvements are, street frontage improvements in this case. So with that, we'll jump into the presentation. So here's the current issue right now, that the sidewalks to nowhere, people had sort of coined. I found one where there was a sidewalk and there's no sidewalks probably within 500 feet or more of that particular walk. The funny thing is they built it on one side of the house, but not on the street where they park the cars. So I don't know if they did that on their own or whatever, how that all happened, I don't know. But anyways, that's one thing. And then, I mean, a concern is if you have a single lot, single property owner, they just want to build a house. How do we deal with that? I found a little graphic, and this isn't in our city, something that was being required of a guy that had a raised yard. They wanted to put a sidewalk in, and you could see to get the sidewalk through there, that's a significant improvement, right? Is an example of something somebody might require. The goal wasn't to remove the power pole maybe or something is what I was thinking. And then what do we do with gravel roadways also? You can see Puget Street. Brent is one that said, hey, make sure you put a picture of Puget in there because there's some houses along it. We got some up at Capitol Hill too, that these are gravel roads. I mean, the goal of a city would be getting out of the gravel road business someday, right? In Newburgh, we still had a couple miles of gravel roads. The city was double this size. So if we can start dealing with the gravel roads now and have some good policies, these could be city projects, local improvement districts, that sort of thing, that we get into paved streets for everybody, I think would be a good council goal down the road. And then you have under improved roadways. Just go back real quick. I want to show you Ward Road. This little narrow thing that has been paved 50 years ago, and it doesn't meet fire department standards. Which is 20 feet wide. Anyways, and the pavement isn't of any substance. It's probably be easier if it was gravel at this point, rather than trying to maintain, the potholes in a paved roadway like that. And next slide. So the last study session on May 9th, here are the comments, and our city manager did a great job documenting those at the last meeting, and he actually emailed them out. What, the day, a couple days later or something, and so if, when he sends those out, if you guys say, hey, I never said that, or I was quoted wrong, get back to him because we can, or me, because we can make mistakes, but I think it's a good way to follow up on what was the last conversation? What were some of the questions? Because we definitely want to answer the questions that you had at the last meeting. So Councilman McDowell had said, what is the most viable way for street installation to occur? City project or developer project? And it's more efficient for the small developer projects to install the street improvements concurrent with other things you're doing on the site, such as buildings. That, they already have concrete there, right? They're doing driveways, they're doing foundations, they're doing all sorts of things. And also with that, though, if the city did take it on, we don't have the manpower or financial resources right now to complete a street project for, private developments. Maybe we can collect a fee in lieu of or that sort of thing, but we still would need to have someone design it. And typically you wouldn't design just for one house. We usually do quite a bit larger projects, right? So we would do, if we were to do it in-house, we would need to bring on probably another person to be able to do that. So we would design it in-house. It'd be probably a block long project sort of thing. We'd have to prioritize those, who comes first, that sort of thing. And so, and then what are we have paving jobs that compete with that, Railroad Avenue jobs that compete with that, all the other road things that we're doing, you just sort of, you tack one more on at that point. We only have 4.65 people in the street budget right now. That's everything. That's engineering, that's maintenance. And so the maintenance guys, they're maintaining the whole right of way. They're doing a lot of mowing right now, obviously, trying to open up vision clearance, street signs, tree trimming. We get into a lot of that, potholing, we're going to go out crack sealing in 2 weeks. You're going to see the guys out doing on that. We see we're out there trying to get some, we do spot paving. We have a grinder. We can go do some inlays and that sort of thing. Well, anyways, we're down 1 FTE in the street department right now. So that's 3.65. I am a piece of the street. There's other little pieces around. We only have a couple people we send out, right? So we're doing a lot with just a couple of people in the street budget. And then we have a $2 million budget. $500,000 of the general fund is going in there. Okay. Got a lot of woes in the general fund. That's a big transfer to streets. Without that money, though, streets really dries up, right? So anyways, I just wanted to point out all the different problems with the street fund, finances, and people is some of it.
I always say, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? So do we ask the developer, do we get the developer to do all the development before he develops property for housing? Or do we do that ourselves? What's cheaper, what's the best,
Yeah, so the way to do it is developer does it up front with his improvements. That'd be a short plat, a subdivision plat. They would all do all their street improvements with that. What happened is a lot of the problems we're having now, those lots were platted in the 1890s, 1910s, that sort of thing. We're dealing with plats that were recorded that didn't have sewer. They didn't put really any streets in. There were dirt roads. And so we're trying to climb out of a system. So you go back and look at a lot of the old resolutions about local improvement districts were real big back in the day that, 4 houses would go in. It's like, we're tired of mud roads. Let's go get them paved. So then the city would go and assess the properties and do a local improvement district. A lot of cities have got away from LIDs because they're contentious. That you'll have meetings here and you'll fill up this room with people, they'll be throwing, the tomatoes at you that, why are we being assessed? We're already being taxed too much, and all that. So, anyways, so there, and some of that's in some further questions. And so the second question is the fee in lieu of the only appropriate option. So we would consider a fee in lieu of maybe for some half street improvements, maybe for a sidewalk, extension that they don't put in, but we maybe do a critical route. Most cities usually just require that developments, you put in a half street improvement. And if it isn't viable, you just probably need to wait. That'd be curb, sidewalk, and the half street. And that just took care for that city. they don't have to deal with the problem of parsing out what we're gonna be parsing out tonight, okay? It's an easy answer to a complex problem, okay? So, but you know, you gotta remember, you got paving, curbs, street trees, driveway approaches, sidewalks. And if you do put in half streets, eventually they connect, right? So if half streets would have been put in a long time ago, certainly in the 50s or the 60s, where a lot of cities just said, you put in half street improvements. A lot of those would be connecting today. The city comes in later and finishes it out. City of Tigard's a good example that I thought 25 years ago as a young engineer when I was doing projects there. Why are they requiring these half streets to nowhere? And it ended up that they'd come through, got some alternate funding and sewed them together with a few public improvement projects. And it's worked out pretty good for them there. You do have to have some larger undeveloped stretches though, where you get some larger frontage improvements. You know, you can't have 50 feet, go 200 feet, have 50 feet, 200 feet. And so we're going to get to that in a minute in what we're suggesting this evening as a possible policy decision. So other funding options though is the local improvement district. You know, we've fallen away from that in the last 10 years or so, 20 maybe. You know, I haven't done one. We didn't do one in Newburgh because they're just, you fill the room with people and you know, I can see an LID in a lot of cases, but if you're going to do it, it'd be a big local improvement district for blocks and blocks and blocks. And that sort of thing, you know, go big with something like that. You wouldn't go with smaller ones. And then those property owners would directly benefit by a street improvement, right? And maybe some sidewalk extensions and that sort of thing, that it's going to increase the value of their homes, probably make them a little more sellable, especially ones that are on gravel road with a lot of dust and that sort of thing.
LIDs can be driven by the residents too.
Yep,
They can certainly come to the city and request to be included in LID and move forward with the people in their street or block or greater area.
Do you remember when the last LID was done?
There wasn't since I've been here 3 years.
Oh, it was.
And where it was? Do you remember where it was?
Yeah,
Probably had some
the-
sewer
What-
LIDs. You see sewers a
The
lot.
only one I recall was on the south side of town.
At Hillcrest
if I remember
area.
correctly, exactly. Hillcrest
Behind the
area.
old Red Apple in that vicinity, wasn't it?
Something around
Didn't that have to be done
It
because
was
of the
20
sewer line or something like
20-some
that?
Years ago. I think it's specific to street improvements.
Okay,
If I remember.
remember
believe
that
it
one.
was to get a street paved. But we'd have to do some research to.
well, they were thrilled, the neighborhood was thrilled to have that done. The roads were so bad through there. That's what I remember. Talking.
Yeah.
So a couple others, so the council can approve the LID or you could be petitioned by the property owners. There's also like local option transportation taxes, which would require some voter approval. Or we can increase the TBD sales tax or add on like a vehicle registration fee. Those would all be voter approval. So there are some voter approval functions that we could do to increase transportation funding. So, and then Eric, you had mentioned that you wanted to see the streets and conditions in a matrix. We'll do that in the future, once we figure out what the matrix is, right? Then we'll put something together that's logical. It's a flow chart type of arrow system, and then run that through you guys so you can check it out. You'd mentioned that the owner shouldn't be responsible for sidewalk maintenance. Currently in the municipal code, it has the abutting owner shall maintain and repair and reconstruct the sidewalks. And RCW also backs it up. So the revised code of Washington states that it allows city to delegate or designate that authority. So we're within, you know, state law to designate that, and that can be changed by council, right? The vote of the council.
Well, I just meant like, you know, downtown railroad, you got all those trees pushing the sidewalk up. Do we want those property owners to go out there and fix that? I mean,
So
And that's.
I would like to propose a change there down the road that I think in this downtown commercial district, I'm used to the city maintaining the sidewalks for a high pedestrian benefit. I think it's in public interest for our street division to maintain that. That's for you guys to decide, though. Residential districts, not as much so, but we want to encourage a lot of foot traffic down there, right? And I wouldn't recommend like on Olympic Highway North or anything like that either. But if you're in a downtown core, I think it benefits the abutting property owners for the city to do those repairs. The previous city I worked for, they didn't, and the property owners were grinding around the trees and doing all sorts of things, you know, outside their shops and whatever. And I think it's a better public function just for that small block for us to take care of that. So when I came in with the new design standards, I would probably include that that would be the one sidewalk district that the city would maintain the trees and the sidewalk, and then all other locations would be maintained by the abutting property owners.
I've said this a million times and maybe not that many times, but I have an issue with the city owning the sidewalk in front of someone's house, but the homeowner has to keep repaired if it needs to be repaired.
Yeah, so the city actually doesn't own the sidewalk. We maintain the right of way for the benefit of all the public. So we're maintaining the street and the curbs, right? And the pavement. The abutting property owner is responsible for a landscape strip if they have one, and street trees and sidewalks. So, but that's for all the enjoyment of all property owners, right? And within the whole city, it's open to everybody, right? So, anyways, I understand, in terms of liability, there's some liability on the property owner that you need to maintain the walk in front of your house. And 99% of the cities have property owners maintaining these. You know, there's very few. Again, if we want to shift to that model, we would need to look at financially how we were going to be able to do that. You know, that we need to go out and be proactive, have people, have concrete, have sidewalk grinding, and all that. I mean, it's another service we would
Right.
bring on,
And
obviously.
to be clear, at this point, we're not proactively pursuing sidewalk replacement and maintenance amongst our property owners, you know, that is.
No,
that has
somebody
been
slips, trips and falls, it's the homeowner. That's on the hook. Or their
potentially.
insurance.
I mean,
And that's in the
We'll
United
see.
States of America, it's just.
it's a
how it
no state
works.
claim.
When we get a complaint, though, you know, we report it to the
Yeah.
property owner and tell them it's their responsibility and they need to go fix it, right? So
You can't
we
block
do,
the sidewalk.
That's- yeah.
You can't.
Yes.
we're reactive code enforcement is what it is. Yeah.
Oh. I still don't, it's just like, would be like, this is crazy to say this, but it would be like the city taking your house for something and then you having to make the repairs on it, even though they own the house. I just have an issue with it.
If it's a detriment to the rest of the community, it makes
What is?
like a safety, if it's a safety issue to the community around it.
Yeah,
I understand your feelings on it.
yeah, it's just something. I don't know, until we get money to do projects on sidewalks, which, you know, that may be a long time. I don't know. I know you're
You get
doing,
caught up on the street system, right? And sidewalks are important too, right? Because
That's
we
right.
want to promote healthy activity and people walking, right? So they have an important function in the community. So it can't all be about cars, right?
so you get a little old lady that owns the house and here's the sidewalk that the city is cities. She's expected to maintain it. She has no money. She has nobody to help her. Someone falls on that sidewalk and then they come out and sue her. You know, where's that person? I mean, that's just something to think about.
So a couple of,
To be clear, the city isn't one person, right? The city is the entire community and all.
Right,
residents of
I
the
know.
community, Right, they
Right.
share in that burden of that public infrastructure.
And
Correct.
that's why the state of Washington has what's called joint and several liability. And if the city is 1% at fault, the city has the deeper pockets, the
Correct.
city is going to pay in the lawsuit. I think we're worried about an issue. That isn't really a big issue. I don't think, like they're saying, I don't, how many claims a year are we getting related to sidewalk issues.
In front of residential.
In front of residential, right?
Yeah, you ever heard of one?
Since I've been here, I've seen two.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And how,
Quite bad.
how much of it was the city's fault and the homeowner's fault because of, unmaintained vegetation or bad drainage or whatever, right? You could probably go deep on this, but.
So if you folks are interested, we could set up a small little grant fund. It would be on a year-by-year basis. I did this with the last city. We started with $20,000, okay? And it was a first come, first served basis. You had to give an application that met certain criteria and that we could assist with some sidewalk repairs. Something like that. At least there was a program to assist low-income property owners, that sort of thing. If you're interested, we can talk about it more at another date. I'm trying to
Yeah,
get through street standards. Sidewalks are a piece of it. I get it. But we can come back later and talk about that a little more if there's consensus.
sorry, go ahead.
Is there a possibility, I know that you're gonna be sealing the cracks in the roads? That's with that kind of rubbery stuff, that kind of glue.
Yes.
Is there any possibility of finding out where some sidewalks might need some of that, fill in the cracks?
We typically on sidewalks grind out the humps and replace anything that's cracked. The cracking compounds and patching stuff just don't wear well. They just pop back out with freeze thaw cycles. So we typically have to replace, if it's cracked that bad, a new piece of sidewalks going in, a new panel.
Most development that you've seen where they're building new neighborhoods, 100 homes or more, or something like that. Typically, the developer wants to design sidewalks in their project for a reason. And why is that? Because it sells. People want a
That's
walkable
correct.
community, right? So our long-term focus here, albeit we have projects that happen throughout the year that are inconveniences at times, but the long-term approach is what we're focusing on, which is making the community desirable for people to want to develop. And again, what we're seeing with the larger projects that have been pitched to us is lots of sidewalks, lots of walkability, interconnected services and everything else. So our code should be friendly to that design that people are looking for.
And it currently it's the developed neighborhoods that have a small amount of infill is where we're bumping into issues. And I'll get with that resolution here in a minute. Number 5, what is the proposed in lieu of fee? So if we chose to adopt some frontage improvement charges, there's some fee estimates below. And I took it from Railroad Avenue. We added a little bit for design and bidding, construction inspections. So the materials and installation costs, sidewalks will be about $8 a square foot. Concrete curb is about $22 a foot. To overlay a gravel road is about $8 a square foot. If you were to dig the road out and put the base rock in and pave it, it's about $15 a square foot. And then if you're doing a concrete storm inlet, about $2,200, 12-inch storm, the PVC piping is about $90, and to put in a dry well is about $3,500. Those are just sort of numbers like that. And we'll talk more about frontage improvement charges a little further in the presentation.
Is that labor and materials, these numbers?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay,
So can TID grants be used to supplement in lieu of fees collected for residential projects? And so that the Transportation Improvement Board funding is typically limited to collector and arterial roadways, not as much local low volume streets. So I'd say probably not. Now, some of these developments do back up, they're not all on local roads, right? And so the answer would be yes for the higher volume type of roadways. If there are, some houses along those roadways that still need to be developed. So it's sort of a mostly no, but a little bit of yes, that we could use some additional funding. We pay 12.5 cents to every dollar we get from TID in terms of grant funding for projects, but usually they're on higher volume roadways. So narrow streets are good, that you agree with traffic calming methods. So the current local street width is 40 feet, just so you guys know. We're probably going to go to 32 feet in the new standards. That's the International Fire Code. Now, remember, you're driving down a 32-foot wide roadway. You got about 7 feet of parking on one side, maybe 8, depending on the car size. Another 7 feet on the other, okay? Well, then your travel lane, if you take 16 minus 32, how much you got? You have
Still
16,
Right?
okay? Well, 16 for 2 cars sort of works, okay? A truck and a car starts getting a little tight. So what happens is residential driveways, people sort of move over, the other guy drives by. And so you want your local streets to be gridded out well. You can't go 15 blocks with a local street, right? There needs to be a lot of other local streets, keep the volumes down. People sort of scoot over, go into driveways every once in a while to go around the Amazon truck, that sort of thing. But you get traffic calming, okay? It's inherent. And then you look at how often are there doubled up cars all the way down the street, usually in the evening. The amount of deliveries and larger trucks usually go down in the evenings also. So they work out good from what I've seen. I think 32 is a good number. It reduces by 8 feet the width in our current standards. And then Councilor Bowe, how's the habitat project on Park Street affected? And the street standards that we're talking about are in the NR zone. Habitat for Humanity is in the commercial residential valley zoning district. And we weren't going to apply infill street standards to a commercial zone.
What commercial business is on Park Street?
There's one, yeah, right, it's mechanic.
The what, they're still there?
And then you have the apartment site, which
It's a
is
multi-family. Could be considered.
Oh, right. Okay, who's the mechanic?
The underlying issue is it's zoned to appropriately for commercial use, right?
Right,
So you can open a commercial business there. Right, it's not just residential use.
okay,
So it's the underlying zoning, not the actual use right now, the underlying zoning. So
yeah, and I think the mechanic store was there, or shop was there before
Central
anybody.
shop's been there a long time.
Been any other houses or apartment houses on that
Here in
street?
the old Simpson.
There'll be some more commercial on that street soon.
So Councilor Peterson, how are frontage improvements progressively tied together at different stages and dates with existing infrastructure? Spoke about that a little bit, but you know, mostly most cities require just half street improvements to go in. Eventually you got to stitch them together though, right? So if there's huge gaps, it is a problem, right? And you'll see in a bit, Ben's the one that figured it out. How we think we can get around that, where you keep small gaps that maybe need to be filled into the future, build half streets for longer stretches. But if there is no half street, don't build it if there's a bunch of already houses in there. We'll have some things we're going to talk about in a minute on that. But over time, they do get stitched together. These could be with redevelopment type of clauses. We're going to talk about that a little bit later too, that if replacement structures and that sort of thing go in, you know, this is way down the road, that frontage improvements could apply at that point. So we also on city initiated projects. So when we go replace a sewer line or a water line, we usually go in and do street advancements also. So at that time, when we replace the sewer line, if there was some curb and sidewalk and a few sections that need to be finished, with the utility improvement project, we'd go knock out the street project. So like we did with the Basin 3 project, that was a huge example of something, right? A big project that improved.
All of the basin projects so far. I mean, my house in the 90s, they did this, all the sidewalks that are new there is because of this basin project. as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so
so yeah, we can look at those in the future too, as we replace these pipes in these older neighborhoods.
And are we able to do sidewalks with the sewer basin project, because essentially we're upgrading sewer and we're eliminating like certain ditches and things like that and going into curb and gutter.
We had
That's how we're
alternate
trying to
funding.
justify-
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
So what about the Hillcrest area, Beverly Heights? That got paved before water and sewer was laid under there?
Where's that?
That direction. Is that right?
I don't know.
Yeah, that was,
Hillside,
it was straight,
No, Hillcrest, Beverly Heights, up off Five Corners, up that direction.
I remember when it comes to. Within, well, I remember when Councilmember Feast was here, it was in front of her house, they had put new pavement for the roadway. And then very shortly thereafter, I want to say within 2 years, came in and pulled it all up and put in the new sewer basin. So it was just a timing of roadway improvements and infrastructure.
I think there was
improvements.
just the kind of the skim coat of asphalt though, they did.
Very
with the
possibly.
grader, right? Yeah, it was pretty.
But
late
It's
talk.
the Cohasset Road, it's Beverly Heights that goes out to
Like the-
Lake
Lake
Bowl,
Bowl.
excuse me.
That was a
Beverly,
water line replacement project
Ah,
that,
Okay.
that installed that.
Wasn't Lake Boulevard a TID project?
I believe so, yeah, from
Got it.
Pioneer Way, Lake Boulevard from the Mill Street, First Street intersection all the way up to city limits.
Yeah, that's where we put sewer and no laterals. Right? To what?
Right.
I think some of them
them had
had stuff, some didn't, if they didn't have, if they're vacant lots or something to that extent, yeah.
Okay,
That's usually a requirement, that funding that you have to get into like infrastructure. The sewer is brand new, like,
and that goes to everybody's, when their septic goes out, they can.
they did a majority of the houses that were there, they stuck to them.
Okay,
So Councilor Gutierrez, you're interested in collecting fees up front over frontage improvements, needs certainty for city and developer, highest impact, highest environmental standards. So yeah, we could look at fees. I gave some of the numbers on the prior page, but for developments for parking strips, and sidewalk and curb and paving. One thing we need to consider, though, is to make sure that minimal improvements that meet fire code for safety are put in. So there are some existing lots that front a street, like you were seeing earlier, that it doesn't even meet fire standards, right? And so there's a minimum improvement. If we did collect frontage improvements, we need to make sure there's a minimum base improvement just for fire life safety. That would need to go in. And so anyways, if we did collect fees, we'd bid larger projects, we'd save up money, obviously. And constructed by the city engineering at a later date. We obviously would need to add staff to do that. That's things that we're not doing right now. Because we have a lot of different, obviously, street projects we're working on.
Yeah.
So it's a model that can be considered,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I want to be clear, I have no problem with new development, Peacock Ridge and many like it, doing all of this. My concern is some of these lots downtown and on Mountain View where there's just an empty lot. And then 30 houses on that block, and the only sidewalk gonna be there for the next 30 years is in front of that one lot that gets built. That's my concern. New development, I believe, should do everything that they need to do to make it walkable and beautiful, and the water runs the right direction and
Yeah.
and everything. I think.
Yeah, we're already on board with that. That's
Yeah.
already in the
Yeah.
standards. So that keys into number 11. What is the definition of infill? We're gonna follow up on slides with that.
Can I
Yeah.
emphasize the environmental standards, because we have two fish, salmon stream creeks coming up and down. We eat out of the bay from oysters and shellfish. And it's very important for me that we have the highest environmental standards, especially in treatment of our water and precious resources, so.
Yeah, and the Department of Ecology stormwater manual that we're under now, when you're creating new impervious surfaces, you're treating that water, infiltrating it where you can, detaining it if you can't infiltrate it. So we're, in terms of stormwater, we're on the right track.
And also having the set asides for recharge. So all of that, I think, is important if we have development here, because we have something that's special and unique, not very unique.
Yeah.
It's singular beauty that we have with the sound and the water and where we're placed. So I believe that we have the highest responsibility to take care of that and maintain that while we develop and create a livable place. It must also be environmentally sound as well as economically sound.
Yeah, Yeah, no, we're pretty on board with that, especially the Department of Ecology manual is pretty progressive. It is, and it's statewide too. In Oregon, where I came from, every county and every city sort of had their own version of things, and it was really hard to map out. And so I like that the state of Washington actually has one manual that applies to everybody, and it really allows the engineers in the world and the community to really know how to design things properly. And so when some of the bigger subdivisions go in, you're going to see significant stormwater ponds and, to cut back on the flow and to treat the water and that sort of thing. So you'll see a difference, and you'll see some open space parks too, which is part of some of our park standards.
Critical areas.
Yeah,
Ordinance
critical
requires
areas being
what-
protected.
Wetlands to be maintained, buffers included amongst
That's-
those, as well as.
That's like the big, that's like over in the housing developments in Olympia, the big ponds, sometimes they're full, sometimes they aren't.
Yep, that's what you
So
can see.
that's gonna be a requirement of these new developments, right? Okay.
It's been a requirement.
Yeah.
It's- Yeah, well, yeah, I know that. I'm
Yep.
kind of talking
Yeah.
about when
Yeah.
we get developed. here.
Lakeview House in the winter and a hole in the summer.
So Jay, I have a question about fee in lieu of, so. In some ways, that makes a lot of sense to me, because if you're gonna put in a tiny little patch that's not gonna go to anything, it makes more sense to put it in a more significant project that maybe has a better benefit for a larger public. My worry with that is that if we don't have a mechanism to either spend those dollars as they're coming in, our buying power on those dollars is going down, so we're collecting $500, let's say, and that project, when we get to it in 10 years, is gonna cost us far more than $500, so how are we managing, I guess, that piece of fee in lieu of with regards to I guess just our budget on that side of things?
Yeah, so I mean, when you collect the money, it'd go into a fund. It could be a sidewalk fund or a paving fund, because they are sort of different functions, right? And then our engineering division would need to make sure we kept those spent down. And so as we saved up enough money, for like a sidewalk project on a critical pedestrian route or something,
Right.
where we took sidewalk fee in lieu's, we would schedule out projects every couple of years to go spend those funds down on what council thinks are priority projects.
That's the unknown, though, right? How many infill lots are you going to have? What's the sum of the in lieu of fee on an annual?
How many
basis?
houses are gonna burn down or, that,
How many
burn
houses,
empty?
how many infill lots are gonna be developed,
right,
correct? If
right.
it's 20 a year at, maybe you can do something. If it's 5 a year, we're probably, that buying power is probably not gonna be there in the next year.
Well, and it costs the city more to, as we've talked about before,
Certainly.
it costs the city more to do these projects than have private development take care of these projects. So, I mean, there's a balancing act here, right? And giving flexibility and encouraging growth and development in a meaningful way, but also realizing that those dollars may not be affecting the change we're wanting to see long term.
That's correct. So Councilor Sherman, you like the medians on collector snow storage, and we're going to include that as a design element for collector roadways. Councilor Gutierrez, you want promotion of infill as on open right of ways as a priority, and that is important. We also have obviously the brand new subdivisions that are going in also, so it'll sort of give people a choice. You can live on a little more rural street on an infill house, or go buy in a full subdivision, and maybe the lots are probably a little tighter too, most likely, right? In a lot of instances. Councilor Bode, what's the impact of small builder? 1 or 2 lots is not feasible for the installation of improvements. And so the financial impact of a small builder to construct street improvements should be similar to fees collected by the city, unless we choose to subsidize the cost. That the city managed public improvement projects are typically more expensive, as our project, we have to pay prevailing wages. And also larger projects trigger stormwater requirements, right? These little small projects where you're putting in a sidewalk and a little frontage improvement usually don't trigger the Department of Ecology stormwater manual stuff. You still have to infiltrate and take care of the water, but it's not like a huge pond and that sort of thing. So if the city does a whole block in the future and pave it, it's likely we're going to have to, if we can't infiltrate it, we're gonna have to find property to put in a detention pond and that sort of thing. So these small piecemeal projects add up to a full improvement in the future. They do circumvent some stormwater project or part of the project, right? So Councilor Bode was interested in the matrix. We'll get back to you on that. And then we didn't know who this came from, but how are gravel streets addressed? So we do require paving of interior streets and site frontage and improvements for new residential developments that are subdividing property. These are the larger ones. And then subdivisions are also required to improve offsite or gravel substandard roadways as like mitigation. So if I'm doing a 20-lot subdivision and I gotta go out on a gravel road, we're gonna have you pave that gravel road because as an impact. Now, if it's only a 4-lot subdivision, you start getting into a problem of impact versus cost and that sort of thing. So it's the whole gravel road discussion is interesting. If you're adjacent to a gravel road, we're going to talk about that here on the coming slides. So before that, though, I want to talk about our pedestrian map. So this critical pedestrian map is in the engineering design standards manual. This is an update to the 2019 map. What we did here is showed in different colors. In red, you can see is asphalt pedestrian on one side of the road. Blue is concrete on one side of the road. Dark blue is concrete on both sides of the road. And then there's a mix of asphalt and concrete on both sides of the road. And then the magenta or gold, I'm sorry, the gold color is where there's currently no sidewalk, but that would be considered a pedestrian route that needs to be developed in the future. So this map needs some more work and that sort of thing. But what the goal was this, is if I live in a neighborhood that's primarily built out, I should be able to get onto a sidewalk after I walk down a block, maybe two, that sort of thing, that I stroll down the edge of the pavement, and eventually I'm on a sidewalk and I can go running or push the baby in the stroller or whatever. To get back home again, I'm going up the side, I'm going on a shoulder or whatever. Remember, these are local streets that you're with your baby, right, or with your kid on a bike. These aren't like collector roadways. All the collector roadways are pretty much critical pedestrian routes, so they need a sidewalk on them. So that sort of takes care of, we don't, on these older neighborhoods, the idea is don't build sidewalks to every house, to every door. Give it a break, go every couple blocks, and you know, probably more than half of the streets will never have a sidewalk on them. This is a council choice, right? This is just something staff would be recommending, that a lot of the houses are already built and or the majority of some of these neighborhoods are built and there are no sidewalks today. So a policy discussion is maybe there's never sidewalks on some of those streets, but we do say which streets have a higher level of traffic, and that's where you sort of dump out onto it. So like Capitol Hill will be an example. Very difficult to build this improvement, by the way, but you could see going up San Joaquin Avenue and coming up Otter and getting a pedestrian sidewalk into that neighborhood for the future users. I think would be a good priority. That's going to be an expensive project though, because of the walls and ditches and grading and that sort of thing. Anything can be done, right? But it'll be a little spendy to get that one. But I think, you know, and then as this neighborhood grows and maybe we bring in a little more UGA, we might be able to come around sort of the backside and maybe get over to a Peacock Ridge sort of thing, and maybe get people out another way as another option there, right? Where you can't really get downtown from right there, but at least you can go recreate in another direction, could be another option. But this is going to get developed a little more. I'm probably going to have just a study session on just this map. Okay, and what you think some of the priorities are. Obviously, give people a bigger piece of paper to get it to you a week before. Maybe you can drive around with it a little bit and give me back your thoughts. But so the idea is get sidewalks to neighborhoods, but don't give a sidewalk to every single door. Because there's so many houses that are built right now without sidewalks. I just don't know how beneficial that would be. And then if you were building an infill lot here and there, you would pay a sidewalk fee, okay? And that would go into the fund to help build this, a fund to help build some of this. It's never gonna fund this whole thing, but at least we have a priority map and we can start getting going. So the last thing on this is you want people to be able to go somewhere on the sidewalks. That could be downtown's important. Libraries are important, schools are important, right? And there's parks are important. And so we want to make sure these all point somewhere. And then also, if I go out, I'm a runner, I like to go out, I never like to go out and back, if you know what I mean. So if you're riding your bike, I like to go on a loop. So where are the 3 mile loops here, right? 2 mile, 6 mile, have cutoffs. The railroad trail coming up the middle, which isn't shown on here. This was an older map, but that sort of bisects the center of our community. It can be like a spoke, a central hub where we're wrapping in loops of people. So more to come on this map, okay?
So Jay,
Yeah.
to do a sidewalk up on Capitol Hill along San Joaquin, there's gonna have to be a retaining wall on that, and that's even a bigger expense.
It's a big expense to get a sidewalk up there. We would need to evaluate the cost versus the benefits on something like that.
And Jay, how does this dovetail with the Safe Routes to Schools and some of the other programs that we've been working on upgrading pedestrian safety in those school areas?
That does. I mean, the primary is to get kids to school safely. It's a good source of funding too, right? That most of those are 100% grant funded. So some of those we can start saying, hey, you know, this is a Safe Routes to School grant application. In Oregon, I applied 10 times and never got one. Okay, here, the state of Washington does a better job funding improvement projects. And so safety project especially. So a much better climate here, right? Now, to be able to do projects, you have to have people in an engineering division, okay? You're looking at a good part of the engineering division right here, right? So you know, I've moved over and so we need people. Engineers are hard to find right now. I don't know, people that are in the business know that it's very hard to find. Any staff member is hard to find, right? But civil engineers are difficult right now. So as we pile up projects, we need to be cognizant of the workload. Okay, you guys ready? I'm
I
on
got
page
one
6.
more
Yeah.
question, one more question. So if we do a safe route to school, let's say up Capitol Hill. Don't we want to save those safe routes to school closer to the schools? I mean, up Capitol Hill is a long ways for somebody to walk.
Correct.
to
The school bus goes up there already. I'm assuming kids aren't walking out of that neighborhood, so it probably wouldn't be eligible for Safe Routes to School project.
Okay,
So infill lot standards, okay? So this is singular lots are coming in, okay? So these are just single parcel sites. I was trying to be clear here. So the last study session, you guys appeared that the definition of an infill lot is a single undeveloped existing lot of record that one home can be built and you can't divide it, partition it, nothing like that. I just want to go build a house on a lot that I own, okay? So down here, I got that little picture and it's at Washington and H Street. And you can see that it has pavement 20 feet wide on Washington and also on H, and it has a gravel alley in the backyard, okay? You can see there's an existing sidewalk across the street there at the top of the picture. That's that sidewalk that is the definition of a sidewalk to nowhere. I mean, there's nobody around there, right? So so then you can see down to the south of this person, this is the trailer, swimming pool. I don't think there's a house there, okay? I think if you move that out of there, there's a second house that most likely can go on there. And then, so they're pretty much developed around them though. So this is a singular lot. So you go down to the bottom here, and there's a little picture on the right there that shows what their frontage improvement looks like. You got paving and you got a gravel shoulder there for parking. So in the residential zone only, infill lot standards, I'm down the bottom left there. You ask a couple questions, do sidewalks, existing sidewalks abut the site? And is the site on a critical pedestrian route? Okay, that's that previous map that I showed you. So on number one, if there's a sidewalk abutting the site, you construct a sidewalk along the frontage. If you're connecting, if your neighbor has a sidewalk, I think you build a sidewalk. In this instance, there isn't much around, right? They wouldn't build a sidewalk. So, and then if it's on a critical pedestrian route, you'd construct the sidewalk on the critical pedestrian route, okay? So I am undeveloped lots on a critical route, you're building that walk. You're also building, extending a walk if one is stubbed to you, right? But other than that, if there's a node of number one and number two, this is the matrix, this is in a graphical form, if you know what I mean. It's gonna not be as clunky, right? I didn't have enough room to draw the little flow chart also. So if it's a no to number one and number two, you pay the sidewalk frontage improvement charge, it'd be in the master fee schedule. We already have the frontage improvement charge standard in our code, right? We just don't have any rates put in there, but we put that into the master fee schedule. And then that fee collected would be just used on critical pedestrian routes. And we would pick a priority and start developing that priority. And what I like though, is safe routes to school and a little bit of funding for some fee in lieu ofs can be some matching money. And maybe we use some transportation benefit district dollars for some of it too. And so it just gives us another pot of money to maybe go complete some of these priority projects on the critical pedestrian routes. Okay, so that was for sidewalks, okay? I kept it different from the street standards. These are two different subjects in my mind, okay? I know it's a little hard to get your handle around, but I decided if I tried to meld the two of them together, the discussion gets pretty hairy. So I just took sidewalks on the left, streets are on the right. Okay, there's varied site conditions up above, right? I mean, we all can see that. You got a gravel alley in the back, you got gravel shoulders, that sort of thing. So, I mean, on any site, we need to say, what's the frontage road? Is it paved? Is it gravel? Does a road even exist? Is the primary road though that they're driving in and out of, is it 20 foot wide? And it's a slope under 10%. That's fire code stuff. That's fire life safety, right? That they need, the fire department needs 20 foot of gravel roadway or paved if it's greater than 10%. Okay, that's their policy today. Minimum. Yep. And so that's like you can't allow a guy to go build and put a little cow trail to his house. We can't get a fire truck in there, right? So that's important. So then what's happening for the parking along the site? Is it gravel? Is there anything there? Is it paved? And then what's happening with the alley in the back? I would say 50% of the lots on these old plats have alleys, right? And we got to figure out what we're doing on the alley. Are people using it or there are monster trees back there, right? So potential standards. So and this would apply to the picture up in the upper left there. You have to widen, you'd widen the existing gravel access road to 20 foot along the frontage per fire code, and you pay a pavement frontage improvement charge in the master fee schedule. So I'm saying you put in the base improvement, which is, and this is already here in this case. And if you're not putting in curb or sidewalk or any of that, you would pay a frontage improvement charge. And I'm not making statements here, I'm just giving potential options, if you know what I mean. You guys need to figure out what the menu looks like, right? So the second standard would just be, you just widen the existing paved road to 20 foot in width along the frontage, and you pay no fee in lieu of, you don't do anything, you just get the road to 20 feet, right? So there's another potential standard is that parking strip in front of your house, okay? If you have, like in this instance, you have a paved road and it's a mishmash when you drive this neighborhood, there's quite a few people that have paid parking strips, right? Are we okay with having a roadway with gravel parking strips in the future for a brand new house, right? So if you build on that lot, would we have them pave their parking strip or just keep the gravel tuned up? for eternity, right? A bunch of his neighbors have gravel parking strips, right? A bunch of his neighbors have paved them over the years. I'm assuming people are paving their own parking strips because the city typically isn't over there doing that. We're not putting a lot of gravel down on these either. They're the property owner's responsibility, right? We're on just the street part of the roadway. So we need to figure out what we do here. And this is just for that single lot, right? This is all we're talking about here. So what do you do on the alley back there? Is it pavement? Is it gravel? Right now, it's a gravel alley. I'm suggesting that if it's a gravel alley, it needs to be 10 foot wide. And the ground, they put new gravel in, they put in a 10 foot wide gravel alley. This is just for the one infill lot. If the neighbors are using it, it just gets improved with some gravel, right? Make it a little better, right? So any roadway improvements you put in, they're probably minor in this instance. You're gonna have to put in some storm drainage improvements usually, right? That sort of comes with the territory. Not likely, but you might have to dedicate some right of way, right? That it's most of these old plats have all the right of way dedicated, all the alleys dedicated. There's going to be instances where we're going to need additional right of way dedicated. One out of a couple hundred, sort of applicants are going to come in. I'm trying to set the menu to try to apply to most developments, right? And then you pay a traffic impact fee for that new house on the new lot. The current standard in the traffic impact fee section, if you're a lot that was created before 1938, the traffic impact fee is waived, but it says you construct all frontage improvements. Okay, so you have big subdivisions that are putting in full frontage improvements. Okay, and people are buying those houses. Okay, there's a model there. It's can be proven soon, right? If we get some water and whatever, it's coming soon. But also, we need to make sure there's some sort of equity here, right? I don't want to blow the bank of some of these people, but the developers are putting in huge street improvements, and it's likely we should either require a fee in lieu of some sort or some sort of improvements that they could put in my estimation, as staff, rather than this particular one. You can say, go build a house, right? You got to build some gravel parking and have a good day, right? So that's sort of the menu of choices here. So I need to sort of dial this one in before I go to the next one.
I have a really simple question for that though. Let's say there's already a sidewalk and it's the house, maybe it was there 80 years ago and it's not now. So if they go to build on that lot and there's already a sidewalk, are they done? It's already there?
Yeah, if the
Perfect.
sidewalk was already there and it would meet standard, right?
Right.
It can't be all topsy-turvy and cracked and all that,
Yeah.
right? That they would have to make sure they might be doing a little grinding on it or something or improving.
But they wouldn't have to pay the fee for it.
They would not pay a fee if the sidewalk existed. That's correct.
So that's a corner lot.
Yes, I chose sort of one that has is the triple frontage in this case,
Yeah.
right?
So that include the ADA accessible ramps and everything in the corner for sidewalks.
If
all
you
that.
put a sidewalk in with a half street improvement, which a lot of cities would say, you're putting in curb and sidewalk all the way around, you put in an ADA ramp.
Yeah.
Yep. You'd, in this instance, you'd probably want to cross because there's a sidewalk over there that doesn't really go anywhere, but yeah, you got to lead them to something. Now, if there's no sidewalk over there, you would end with just year round. Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be the full improvement scenario. And then we can go from there down to a minimal improvement scenario, right? Or a fee in lieu of scenario.
And first to the definition. Did we get that? Correct in everybody's name?
Yes.
Because it does have the 2 or more undeveloped lots, so if the 2 lots next to this. Are both vacant too, then they're putting in frontage improvement.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did read through that part, I didn't read that part. That's a really important point. So if your neighbors are undeveloped next door, you're putting in full street improvements. And the way this thinking goes is this, is most lots are like, these are like 60 feet wide. Well, if I have 3 lots, it's 180 feet of roadway now that will have curb and sidewalk. And at least the adjacent property owners can get 180 feet of benefit, right? So there's something to think about, what size triggers these street improvements. So even though they're sort of going in one at a time, right, there are 3 lots that are undeveloped and you'd get 180 feet of street in that instance. Anything less than that, if it's just 2 lots or 1 lot, you would pay some sort of fee in lieu of, or do something different, right?
And that was just a number that we picked. That. For like 180 feet, I mean, you can go to 3, whatever, you know. It's just sometimes we have to transition from infill to infill development.
I think 3 is reasonable for a smaller infill, and then development should be 4 or more. I think that's a reasonable number.
Is that what you were suggesting?
Yeah, that's what we were suggesting, that we thought that, you know, the 3 people that could all be
That went into it.
correct. Yeah, you would have 3 lots, they could build houses all at different times, or there could be one person that owns all of them, right? That they would go ahead, but like up on First Street, for example, is Dave Killering, right? Owns those, he owns a whole bank of lots, there's no houses on any of them. This would apply that each lot that he does, there's vacant lots next to him. He's doing a half street improvement for half of First Street or a whole block of First Street in that instance. So it does allow us to set a standard, right? And so at a minimum, you would have 3. Now the lots could be a little narrower. Some of those older plats, there's some 30-foot. Yeah, there's some 30-foot lots. So it might get down to 90 feet of frontage with these smaller lots, right?
So the first house would trigger, in that case, would trigger the whole street.
Yeah, because how's that work if we're doing it different times? We have 2 unsold lots. I buy this 3rd one, I have to put in streets. Well, now there's not 3 lots.
But if they're cons-
But a sidewalk improvement would be.
It would just apply to the others and.
Correct.
How's that
If
gonna
you're
be
contiguous to the improvement,
How
therefore
are you
you'd have to
tracking that?
extend the
5
improvement.
years down the road, 10 years down the road?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just wondering how we're tracking.
So are we grandfathering it in from this?
They would have a sidewalk, yours would have a sidewalk next to it, okay, so in the matrix down here, it says, does the sidewalk exist
Mhm.
next to the site?
Okay,
It would be yes, so then you can connect into it.
No, I'm saying.
but then, if I was the 3rd house, it wouldn't be next to mine.
Yeah, we're gonna need to work that out in the
Okay,
matrix.
I'm just wondering.
That's something in the matrix that needs to get worked out, because what he's saying is you're on the far end, you build the house there. You stub a sidewalk to the street to the center guy, but then the 3rd house over there, you know, and
Yeah.
there's a gap, right? Well, he doesn't have to build one now per the standard.
Yeah.
Because there isn't 2 lots. We need to get that worked out in the
Okay.
matrix.
No, my question was the gentleman you said that owns the whole block. So there's the first house, he builds 1 house or sells that lot to 1 person. Does that trigger that first sidewalk or that whole block,
Well, the whole area is developable,
just in
right?
the frontage?
So you
Does
just
that
have a
one lot?
chunk of sidewalk.
Because some people don't normally, he might sell those lots 1 by 1. You know, so a lot,
Developed or undeveloped, I guess,
what's that?
developed, right, with a house on them,
No.
that's what triggers it. Oh, the
No,
sale
I'm-
of the lot doesn't trigger it. right?
No, I'm saying he
Okay.
sells 1 lot to somebody who says, I like that location, I'm gonna buy that lot, and he builds a house there. And there's 10 lots on that street.
But they're buildable
So
lots.
does that first house build a sidewalk?
Yes.
Yes,
It
yes,
triggers it
because,
under this.
right. Because eventually you'll have consecutive houses. Potentially, right?
And how many lots was that?
He owns
Six
probably.
conventional block, 16 lots, I think, on
Yeah,
that block,
that's
it's a
about right.
conventional block, I think, eight lots on each side of the block.
That makes sense.
And
But
he's not a new subdivision. If you're doing a 16 lot subdivision,
Yeah.
you're putting in full
Yeah.
street improvements. If you have 16
already done.
undeveloped lots, you're putting in full street improvements. It's the same thing,
Yeah.
right?
These are platted lots.
It was already platted. It's really the only difference.
And
Parcels.
that's where we're trying to figure that number out, to say. So it doesn't define as infill lot.
Mhm.
It's infill development that time and then you put.
I mean, on the infills to me is the missing house. That's, and then no sidewalks on either side of it. That is the infill to me. And, you know, is there gonna be we want those lots built on, right? So we wanna make it so they can build, either make a profit or somebody can actually afford to build a house. And not put in a $30,000 sidewalk, and there's never gonna be a sidewalk to the left or the right. That is what I consider infill. Now, if there's a street with 16 lots on it, yeah, of course. You know, I think somebody should make those improvements. I'm just talking about that single lot where there's no left, no right. That just, we got some of those around town where there's a sidewalk.
And
right?
that's the difficulty in coming with the standard, because we have so many different instances around town and so many variations. And you're exactly right. I think it was easy just to look at it and say, okay, sidewalk, no sidewalk, street, no street, that'd be great, but we can't leave it up to staff to interpret that.
No,
that's where it's been
We need
hard.
certainty, exactly right. We need certainty for the people coming in this building, calling us, coming across the counter. We need certainty for our staff too.
Yeah.
These staff aren't gonna be here forever.
Yeah.
Right?
So,
So it's really important that we build that here.
so. Let's say we have a house on Mountain View, Washington, Jefferson, there's no sidewalks anywhere. So, nice little couple bought their house in 1942, they live there, the house burns down. Insurance is gonna rebuild that house, is insurance gonna pay for that one piece of sidewalk? You know, that, so how would that work?
That's actually on the last page of that, it's under redevelopment. We haven't
Okay.
got to that yet, but we need to talk about when a house is a replacement structure or an addition, how do we deal with that? That's the third part of this
I
presentation.
mean, somebody's replacing it because they've got, you know, pockets, they want a better house, that's one thing, but I'm talking about, you know. If somebody owns a house and they have insurance, are they gonna pay for that sidewalk? Cause that,
Again, we don't want this to be an arbitrary decision, right? So we need to have a standard that fits for the developer, the property owner, as well as the city at the same time. We can't make that arbitrary decision when they come across the counter.
It's
It's
just,
just-
you know, I don't
to be
know
fair.
if insurance would cover that or not. If
I
it's a
don't-
requirement, they may.
But I don't feel like they were insuring it before though,
Right.
so they're only covering what you insure.
What your loss was, and if that
Yeah,
was
who's gonna
there.
insure a sidewalk?
Yeah.
Or they
Yeah.
cover
Yeah.
replacement.
Start getting in the weeds with that.
Correct, exactly. Correct. Insurance doesn't cover replacement costs up to a certain.
Next page.
Real quickly,
Yes.
so the reason we selected or you're recommending adjacent to 2 or more undeveloped, because basically that's your neighbor on either side. Because initially I was thinking, okay, +3, because then that's half a block, right? But this is just looking at, there's no one developed on either side of you. This is now, that's what triggers the next step, yes? It's that kind of.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we thought the improvement was long enough then that 3 property owners can benefit. And if nobody ever connected to it, at least there's paid parking in front of your houses. And there's a sidewalk that people can recreate a little bit on and that sort of thing. So you would get benefit from that improvement in front of their house. I know when I had kids growing up, they were out in front of our house all the time with chalk and stuff and whatever. And they'd go down the street quite a ways, but we just thought 3 lots seemed somewhat reasonable. You know, and maybe if it never gets connected to, at least those 3 property owners can enjoy, you know, a frontage. So.
Did we get through streets at all though? I think we just talked about sidewalks. If we can. Talk about the street here, please. Sorry. But at least, you know, we need to develop some consensus here, right? Second,
Definitely.
third meeting, maybe we get some more consensus. We can winnow this presentation down. a little bit.
And I'll actually bring you back some code in the next meeting for you to look at more with some flow charts and that sort of thing.
So obviously A through G are potential standards. The dedication additional right of way can be a safety issue, right? It can be fire code. Because if our right of ways are too narrow, at this point, we may be requiring additional right of way to meet fire code. Meet parking standards, whatever might be applied. So I think that's.
So what are the standards that would require an additional right of way? It sounds like most properties, that's not good, but it's only going to be if there's something existing within our code that we need safety access to widen that.
Residential zones.
There's one up, that actually just came in.
That's
Like
20
12
foot right of ways, maybe.
It's a piece of university,
Mm.
That
Oh,
we have all
That
of it,
one, yeah,
we have
yeah.
all of it, but I think 2 lots. We only have 30 feet of right away.
And University is a major collector someday when that whole neighborhood, those are all platted lots, but there's hardly any development on any of them. And so that you come in for a single family home permit and then plop your house right in the middle of a major collector roadway, right? So there's a problem there. So we're saying if you want to build a house, that's great, but in some instances, you might have to dedicate some right away.
Well, you definitely gotta do something on Puget Street, because in 2015, I spent a lot of time up there with some neighbors and. And I worked with staff too, and basically staff said, I mean, yeah, we could put a street here one of these days, but these people are gonna lose their yards on both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a narrow gravel road, and there's people who got beautiful trees on. And all kinds of stuff, and they're gonna lose their yards,
And
so,
we may have the right of way there that those are in.
Yeah.
But,
It's likely.
yeah,
so, but yeah, and they quit, actually, when I found that out, they quit actually complaining about it, but.
but yeah, so it's rare, but it may be needed to, you need to ask for some that way, even to get a 60-foot wide one or 50-foot wide.
Because we were going to reduce easements, right? Well, Jeff was talking about that.
Well, on neighborhood residential, certainly a lot of the, especially Mountain View, were 60-foot right of ways that were platted at a time, and those aren't necessary. Now we're talking about 32 feet, but if you start talking about arterials and collectors.
Yeah.
they can-
Right.
different-
And to go
different
back to
widths.
that 32. Why would we want to go that small? I know we want to slow traffic, but that seems, if cars have to pull over to the side, that just seems like.
Actually, residential, really, you don't ever. There's next time you're in Olympia or something, bring your tape measure with you, but you'll sort of see what I mean, that it worked, they work. Because a lot of times there's cars on one side and maybe not on the other. And then you got the driveways you can sneak over into. And it's usually if you got a huge Suburban and the Amazon trucks going the other way, you might just eke over a little bit while someone shot by and then you continue. But it's just rare. I lived in a neighborhood like that for 20 years and it's just part of how you drive those neighborhoods. Very common to have 32-foot wide streets, so.
It brings traffic speeds down to, 15 or so, right? Safer.
Just
safer
people
environment.
hit
Sometimes even 20 is plenty, so.
And we have looked at 34 also as an option too.
A couple more feet might help.
It's more to maintain,
It's
more expensive to construct, and it's more to maintain long-term for the city. You have more stormwater coming with that. Just have more pavement to maintain long-term as well.
I just think as long as it's safe for the fire trucks and emergency vehicles to get down, then it's fair.
And as far as the infill lot street standards that are listed here, it seems to me like this is pretty well geared towards matching up to what's existing in the neighborhood, which seems entirely reasonable.
Correct.
I mean, of course, we don't want to add additional unnecessary regulation and burden, but if we're looking at kind of meeting what the neighborhood has and making sure that we're meeting our safety requirements and that everyone's accessible, this seems reasonable to me.
So I think we got the sidewalk part figured out, so let's go up the ladder here. Let's say that infill lot does not have any street in front of it, what are they gonna do? I'm just saying there is no pavement at all, it's dirt and trees,
Unopened.
it's unopened right away, yeah?
Are you talking about First Street there?
Yeah, I'm just talking
Anywhere.
one house here, I'm not talking any multiples, this is the true infill
So we're talking about the
scenario.
road situation.
Do they meet fire code? Is everyone okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that makes that's 20 feet, okay? Do you want 20 feet of pavement or 20 feet of gravel? Because if it's less than 10%, the fire code, the fire marshal might allow gravel.
I think same with like the sidewalks, if it's a piece of street to nowhere, I mean, where are we gonna have them do it just in front of their house? Cause like up on Puget there, you buy a new house and you're doing just a half inch street improvement in front of your place. If it was that, I would go with gravel. But
Now, the next person to you though, this street's gonna leapfrog along, so we're gonna perpetuating gravel roadways at that point. So,
Yeah, it's infill.
no, but this is an undeveloped street, it's an infill lot on a street, the street does not exist, okay?
Just a dirt pathway.
It's a dirt pathway, and we got quite a few of those actually.
What are they building? So take this other one, what are they building if they just develop one lot in the middle of this?
So you're looking at the one on Fur here? Is that the one you're? Or-
Well, if it-
Brent's talking about on sheet 7, upper left, this is the next slide.
Uh-huh.
If you wanna go, you're on. Correct, where you're in the middle of a neighborhood, so you have like Bird Street there is completely unimproved. Somebody says, hey, I wanna build that house over there, right? So in the standard that we just came up with though, that you would be good because you have 2 lots adjacent to you, okay? So full street standards would apply in this instance on that particular one.
and you keep it, are you talking about Birch Street?
Yeah, Bird
Okay.
Street, in the example, you go to full street improvements with what we just went through. But in the instance where there weren't multiple lots, it's a lot that's just there. Do we have, we know we need to meet fire code. Do we allow just gravel or do we want them to pave it?
And there's 12, there's 12 lots here.
But no, let's just go with a single lot.
Just a hypothetical of a single lot, they're on their own and the street is not open, right? They gotta build 50 feet of street. We know it has to be 20 feet wide by the fire code, okay? And it has to support the 75,000 pound vehicle, which is quite a bit of gravel. You know, paving it helps reduce the amount of gravel, so there's completely no road. There's gonna be instances that we get into that where you have a single lot. They need to build a roadway. They're not a development. You know, there's not 3, maybe there's only 2 lots. There's not 3,
Yeah,
right?
what do you wanna see put in, say, third one down? What are they building from? Who's that? San Joaquin or the top? What's it, is it?
Well, the ideal thought would be blacktop it, you know, have a, but if it's not a street, then the next one is gravel it, and just.
Correct, but we're perpetuating, is it okay with
No new
council?
gravel roads.
That's.
No new
Okay.
gravel roads.
That's the policy I'm looking for, if
Yeah,
council, if there's
unfortunately,
concurrence with
This is
council,
an
right?
expensive project and I would be leaning towards paid for. And whatever up until if they're on the unimproved right away, they gotta improve it to. Roughly the site location from. And in
With
this case,
pavement.
it's just pave it through.
So let's say on
And
that,
unfortunately, in this case, sorry, it's just, it sucks because it's gonna be
Right.
expensive and we shouldn't be allowing this to happen anymore. So this doesn't happen in 75 years again, so, so when we do this, at some point too, why aren't we looking at, you know, funding larger projects to pave through these situations? Because obviously in this particular situation, this doesn't make a lot of sense. Probably the reason why hasn't been development is because of some of these improvement costs.
That's correct.
Right? So if we're gonna ignore it and let it go, the developer's not gonna develop it. It's gonna stay a patch of Scotch broom in perpetuity, right? So I'm kind of 50-50 on it, but I'm code wise, no, I'm not supportive of leaving gravel roads, stay gravel roads. We're gonna be under the gun regardless anyways, in probably 5 to 10 years to deal with dust control and the environmental hazards related to that. We're probably gonna be forced to pave them anyways. So we probably should start looking at bundling some projects together. When we do improvements on, Beaver Street or something like that down the road, we should probably be looking at the lateral streets that connect to it that are unimproved and improving them.
Could we do something like in 2029, all streets have to be paved? And then give that 6-year window where like, you gotta develop now because of 2030, and it's gotta be paved. So in 6 years, we have an incentive to get this development done.
And there's a few roads up on Capitol Hill that this way and they're dirt. And they're a mess in the winter time, getting up and down.
They're steep and they're a little hazardous, so,
But in lieu of those costs, why couldn't the developer pave the unimproved Birch Street themselves?
Right.
in this, if there's more than one lot, sure, if
Yeah.
there's 3 lots, yes, they're
They'll be able to
paving the
do
whole
it.
street, we decided on that, but if it's just a singular lot or 2, there's unopened right of way. We know we need to be 20 feet wide, are we okay with 20 feet of paved? We've already dealt with the sidewalk situation.
Yeah, I want to modernize and I want to make sure that we have the infrastructure for the future and not the infrastructure for 50 years ago. So I'm with Jay and Joe. We need to pave as much as possible, but at the same time, if we can do a quick incentive and develop this, because these are undeveloped because of all these, probably all these restrictions we've been putting. So is it possible to do? But like, you gotta do it by X amount of time, X amount of years, or in 20, this kicks in and we have very strict code that everything's gotta be paved. Can we do something like that? Or is that?
That may incentivize the development now with gravel roads. right?
Yeah, and then.
So it could work against.
But then we're maintaining.
Yeah.
Our maintenance costs for gravel roads are extensive.
Yeah.
You guys know that, right?
Right.
Pavement's a lot easier for us. Okay.
But we can kick the can down the road for 2029.
Sooner than you know.
I mean,
It's just the example.
So
It's in-
let's say with what we're talking about here. We're looking at the picture on the left, the grid.
Yeah.
So on Birch Street, say the third one over, somebody buys that one, they want to develop their house on that one, so they're basically center of that. So are we saying, are we saying that they need to pave from what is Bieber here to their lot and not beyond? Or if there's another adjoining road on the other side, which I don't see it, so I don't know. Do they have to do the whole thing?
You'll have to pave a road to the nearest fire access road. We just said you had to meet fire requirements, right?
Okay.
And so you would pave to the nearest fire road, that net fire.
So in this one would be Beaver Street. You wouldn't have to go all the way. You would just have to go to your lot from Beaver Street.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Where my challenge comes in is bouncing back and forth between the hats, because of course, as a developer, who wants to take that cost on? It makes a singular home project there. It's an undoable project because you're adding my profit to the road, but I don't get to recoup. I don't get more for that home because it's on dirt, or if it's on a. It might sell faster, but I don't get a higher appraisal. Like, I'm gonna sell it for what it's gonna sell for.
Alright.
But of course, as a citizen, I want sidewalks everywhere. I want streets everywhere. I walk all over town.
Correct. So
It's-
when you
it's
walk
great
in and you
balance.
ask staff, what do I need to do here? I'm
Yeah.
thinking about buying this. I can
Yeah.
freaking give you an answer
Yes.
and you could
Say,
not
okay.
buy that.
Go to the next-
Right now, I can't tell you what to do there right now.
No, and that's a huge problem, because we run into it often. And it's like, well, what do we do? Well, no, this just says something.
It's the reason why a lot of cities just said, build it all everywhere.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as much as I don't like
It
it.
is.
Yeah.
It's easy to
I
staff.
mean, yeah,
But, I mean-
it sucks, but it.
I've got Balkans right here. It's, this is it. That's it for infill development. It's for street center. It's pretty simple. We're not going this direction.
No.
As we speak.
Yeah, but
Okay,
the 20 is a good compromise.
We're getting more complex, which is fine, right? So we can get back to you on that. So we just got through, is everyone okay? Undeveloped right away. These are only 1 or 2 lots. They're building a fire road that's paved to get to the nearest fire road.
yes.
Well, they're not gonna, I mean, we could do that. They're not gonna build one house is they're gonna pay for the road all the way down to Beaver Street.
I don't know, maybe it's not this lot, maybe that spot has the
Because
best
if these
view.
lots were sold bottom left, number 1. I kind of wish these were labeled like battleship. Anyways, Beaver Street on the bottom left. Okay, so the person builds there, and so they bring the road to them. And then the next person builds and they bring the road to them.
It's hopscotch along, yeah.
But as long as the improvements continue.
Correct. It's just like extension of sewer or water. It's a logical extension of utility and
Right.
roadways. And over time it happens.
I'm rating heavier to certainty, so
Heavy to certainty.
heavier to certainty.
Okay, so then the next one would be, it's gravel now. Okay, you have 1 lot on a gravel road, you want to go build a house. Okay, we said that you need to meet fire code, okay, this 20 feet. But there's a bunch of other houses on this gravel road already, right? And so, what do we do for the pavement? Do we make sure you meet fire code, which would be 20 feet of gravel? Are we okay with that? And
That's
they,
kind of a- Jim was talking about Puget.
Yeah.
Single house.
In that case, I think, I mean, yeah, I think it needs to match up with the neighborhood, and it doesn't make sense for us to put in a little bit there, because that's something that we're gonna have to go in and eventually upgrade that roadway, so I would lean towards keeping that. Like to the neighboring parcels.
Okay, do you want to see a fee in lieu of paving charged to that lot? I'm just, it's in, we put it in a schedule, right? The guy that is on the undeveloped right of way is digging it out, putting in base rock and paving it, right? You just have to pave gravel, which you just, you dress it up, you put down some more rock, you grade it out. And you pave it. The cost is significantly less to overlay the gravel road. Is there a fee in lieu of for that singular house? Does he pay anything for the paving, a paving fee? It's in the menu. I'm just throwing it out.
On
there.
this situation, sure,
I would say,
absolutely.
yeah.
On this situation with all these lots, absolutely.
But we need to make it universal. We can't make it, every one of these can't be.
Okay,
a
I'm
different
not
story.
considering that
Right.
these an infill,
Oh,
though.
no, you get correct. Go back to page six.
Yeah, we're not
We're
looking at
talking
this
page
picture
six only
Yeah.
here. I'm giving you permutations of page six. We jumped off to there as another example, but on page six, you're one lot, maybe two at the most. You're not three, as we already talked about, right? So you're 1 to 2 undeveloped lots, you're infilling. I'm on a gravel street, okay? What am I doing here on the pavement? We need to be 20 feet wide, we already know that, you need fire code. A gravel road 20 feet wide works. Do you want to have them pave that? Or do you want to have them pay a fee in lieu of paving? There are other houses down the street that are using the same gravel road today, right?
I would rather the fee, because the project should be looked at more systematically and not looked at individually. So they need to pay into the system. And we need to adequately plan that out and draw from that. And yeah, we need to do these as larger projects and not one at a time, if I can improve it.
And there's a maintenance benefit to that too. I don't like maintaining gravel roads, but it's very hard if you have quilted pavement. Where one guy's paved, the next guy's not, and whatever. How do I take the grader down there and grade that
Yeah.
gravel road, right?
It's actually.
Okay.
Yeah. No,
So, okay. Trying to see if we got, just so I can make notes.
Okay, now if they're adjacent to a paved street, do I start paving up? Right? So that's a permutation of that it's
Yeah.
paved right here.
I see.
You pave your front, it's just like I made the other guy.
Paved streets paved, Washington's not. but the
Correct.
Corner lot.
And so that starts bringing the pavement to other people.
Mhm.
You guys okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have a distance that we're willing to stay within on that, though? I mean. Like. What if they're 200 feet down that road adjacent to it? I mean,
Like connected to it, like
Directly. above.
Parcel
like
next to it.
eight streets paved on this, Washington's not near this corner lot.
Okay,
But the second lot in, say that one was vacant, you wouldn't, because you're not.
Right, you're not.
And
Okay,
he's already
okay.
on a gravel street that
Perfect.
you
Making sure I was
wouldn't,
hearing you right.
but we could put a distance in there if council chose that, you know. If you're a certain distance away, you'd pave to your house. We were just saying if you front and
Yeah.
you would, right?
Yeah, it connects, if it's adjacent to, or it should connect it.
I like the fees a lot. I think the fees. Because when you're talking about just building a home for my family, and I'm putting in a Highline home or something in town. To try to get a paving company off, to try to pull some of these tax off. It's not normal people aren't really ready to just, yeah, pave my road. It's hard for that kind of infrastructure stuff to get put in by just somebody who wants to build on an info lot.
Yeah.
Okay, are we missing anything? I'm asking these.
Yeah, I know.
guys here.
Sorry.
And
There's a lot to think
It's
about.
been a long
Yeah, I
day,
mean, it's-
so, yeah.
This isn't just,
Right.
in the lieu of fee. You need to make sure that that person building that house knows that we are not probably gonna put a street or a sidewalk in front of their house, that money will be used. In a critical area. Is it a critical area? No, what term did you use?
Sure.
We would
Critical
use
pedestrian area.
pavement and via blue to just go do a
Yeah.
whole block somewhere, you know, Todd Road, we
Because-
go up there with the county paving machine or something, and we'll just go deal with some of
Yeah.
these things in that way.
I remember a few years back that the traffic impact fees, people were kind of upset that they weren't using the impact fees in front of their business. So,
But I think
you know,
where
that's
we're
as long as we're clear that this is going to pot and we're gonna do what needs to be done first. And then second, then third,
they also have the choice of doing the improvement.
Yeah.
So you can pay this fee, which is nominal, or you can do this.
That's
I
actually
want it.
good point. If you want to put the improvement in, but you're taking the pavement all the way down to the nearest paved street.
Yeah.
I can't have a piece of gravel
Nope, agreed.
that I'm trying to maintain between pavement. It doesn't work very well. And it's dangerous because if you pull a gravel out on the more roadway surfaces.
And we, listen, Lua, we shouldn't be doing any of that for big development, though.
No.
They need to put in their stuff.
Correct, we're
Right.
talking about.
We should,
just-
I know, but I just want to be clear. I don't want somebody saying, oh, I'll just let you guys do it later. No.
Consistency.
Yeah, I think, did we get enough resolution there? I think we
Pretty
got
close.
enough. We're gonna have to go back and look at tape too.
Well, we actually, we'll have to look at it though, right? I'll show it to you, so you can visualize it.
That's correct. We'll come back with better stuff here, right? These were just trying to get the questions out, right?
You guys
So
are-
on the next one, we've answered this question, okay? So infill development, these are platted lots, okay? These are more than the 3 undeveloped, right? These are either 4 and up. They build full street improvements.
Yeah.
You guys were okay
Right,
with that?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's quick. We're gonna move on from number 7, if you guys are okay. And now this is the fun one. Actually, the first one was the fun one. The site redevelopment. So if you look, you see 8th Street and there's an alley. And this old laundromat that used to be there, they're no longer doing that. They're putting a restaurant in there. Okay, so Brent and I started asking, okay, are they ever gonna build anything for this commercial development? You know, frontage wise, should we have any standard there? Okay, and then you go down to Nealon and Front Street. We just paved that, and it was unreal that the Google machine or the Street View came through, right? And so anyways, that's what it looks like today. But that's getting redeveloped. The county's moving some of their services in there. And so the question is what triggers them to do some roadway improvements, you know, as they redevelop? These are 2 commercial, okay? Question came up a while ago, residential, that's a different bag, right? In a residential district, it might be something a little different than in commercial districts, right? But staff need to be given some guidance here that if they're doing a huge building addition or remodel or, you know, whatever it is, then we need some sort of thresholds where street requirements click in, because right now we don't have any. You just keep building on these old facilities and there are no standards. You just leave it the way it is,
So
right?
that first picture where that laundromat is, there's a restaurant going in there,
Yeah,
in the building. They didn't tear the building down.
no, they're building in there and their parking's gonna be on the alley and that meets their needs. And then they're gonna put a fence along H Street, so people don't park there necessarily. They might parallel park, but there's no more nose end parking. So, anyways, the first question is should we have road and sidewalk standards for redevelopment sites?
Yeah.
And then you have commercial and industrial, and you have the residential zoning district. They're probably gonna be sort of different depending on what district you're in. So this came out of our code, the standards manual right now, that redevelopment is a conversion, structural alteration, relocation, significant alteration or improvement or enlargement of any structure and or the addition of improvement of site features that change the type or increases the intensity of the use of a site, okay? It's an okay definition. There's some things we would probably change with that, but that generally says, hey, if you're increasing square footage or your intensity of use, which would usually be traffic related, you've got to do something. So then we've set thresholds to those type of basic ideas, right? So potential thresholds down below. So if the on-site improvements, this would usually be the building improvements, it exceed 50% of the assessed value of the site improvements, you would have them consider street improvements, and that's very common. I don't know if Bothell had that, but I did see that in others. That improvement standard also is in the building code. Sean follows that if you're going in and if the building's worth X and you're doing 50% of that value, you have all sorts of requirements,
Yep.
sprinklers, full
Modern
kitchens,
code.
modern, everything, ADA, the whole bit. So it's pretty common for building improvements to do that. Do street standards apply in that instance?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. So that's pretty common with most others codes.
Three, I heard,
Yes.
I heard three.
Oh.
Me also.
Nodding for.
What, sorry, what's the, on Nealon in front, what is that project?
It's the county is putting their mortuary in there.
In storage.
That's a major change of use for that facility, isn't it?
Well, they're doing storage in the 3 big bays and then moving in.
Their facilities department. As well as their corner.
So we should have really well-paved roads that could support larger vehicles.
Well, they're already paid, we just did it.
Yeah.
They
I mean, Front Street
This is
needs
the big one.
sidewalk and
Wrapped
vegetated
around
strip,
sidewalk.
illumination. right?
Mhm.
So,
For modern improvements.
yeah, that
So
what you're
does
getting at
their
with this?
use trigger, they're not doing any improvements that exceed the 50% threshold?
But the intensity and change of use, it looks like derelict storage, and you said they're moving the facilities office. Or facilities,
Facilities department, yeah.
so they're gonna be coming and going all day long, it's business.
And the prior user though was, what did he do there?
It was a fabrication
Yeah.
shop, so yeah. Everything coming in with office.
He had things going on, that use was in there forever.
If we want to connect our parks and everything and walkable areas, this should be in that long range plan of a walkable area, because if we want to draw people downtown. You know, we need to have the standards where they're accessible and they're walkable and they connect to all the things we want to do in the future, connecting all our parks and facilities together. That would be my standard.
Okay,
That it connects with our long-term vision of what we want is parks and walkability.
Because if it stays basically the same thing without improvement, who's gonna wanna walk?
Right.
That's, that's it,
Well, who walks on Front Street anyway?
yeah.
well, I gotta go to Bob's Tavern, don't I?
Well, that's not on Front Street.
It's just
You go in the
right around
back way, so
corner.
you don't see it.
A lot
Yeah,
of,
you're
a
just
lot of
going the back
walkers,
way, so we don't see where you go for lunch.
a lot of walkers there. and
Yeah,
dog
this all
walkers.
this would just become apartments.
So, I mean, there's another thing that's number two, that if you add a bunch of trips per day, that might click in a threshold, right? That would be, you're not doing a ton of tenant improvements, but your change of use is a bunch more traffic, right? And so that might be a threshold.
But, yeah, someday it might be zoned residential for
Yeah.
apartments, so I want the highest standards put in there
Yeah,
for
Well,
walkability.
it's GC, it allows for residential
Retail on the first
above,
floor, so
above,
then it's
second one
residential.
above at this point.
I wanna be,
It might
I
not
wanna
always-
be pushing that as the solution and not continuing to try to recycle mothball, old derelicts, whatever.
Redevelopment.
Yeah, I
What
wanna be,
people-
if there's a quote unquote incentivizing anything, the incentive is. If you're gonna go towards the residential retail route, it's gonna be more feasible for your project. Or
Why don't we have an
something.
artist village here,
But, I mean, we can't interfere with the private or, whatever, but we do have a permitting component with the change of use.
Mhm.
Right, and what we will allow and not allow, and in this particular area, it's just frustrating. Looking at the budget and everything else that's going on, and this is a loss for the city. This particular project, we will lose.
Wonder why they're using this as facility storage and not Livingston County Public Works property out where they have a lot of land.
This is more of their building.
Yeah.
Infrastructure that they have down.
That's, yeah, understand.
Maybe
Yeah.
They don't have
understand they-
space over there, I'm
Space
assuming.
is the premium and everything else is just, yeah, okay,
But then if you go to the H Street and Alley, the little restaurant there, full frontage street improvements. If we would have walked up and said, hey, you're building alley improvements and a sidewalk and a curb and all that. It's likely that restaurant probably wouldn't move forward. So, I mean, the thresholds, we just need to be cognizant of how this, and so when we come back to you, we'll have examples of
Have
what would.
they submitted building permits yet? They've just been through pre-sub. Right? The restaurant, they've just been through pre-sub, right? They
I
have
think they got their use. They went through, they had to read from their use.
Conditional use, but
They have to go through land use.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we offer these businesses So it's not such a big, huge chunk of money to do it in phases? I don't know if that's a possibility. And kind of as they get their money, they do another phase.
Yeah, but who's to say that business is gonna stay in business?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it presents some challenges as far as managing that too, right?
I mean, there is some language out there for historic buildings. Which I've been trying to get information for about 4 or 5 years now, and still haven't gotten any. About some of the buildings downtown that don't get used because of a narrow staircase or because, you know. The windows, or I don't know, but there is some historic building codes in Washington State that does allow. You know,
You can alter the interior of a building, most of the historic.
are you can do them?
no,
No, I think
I'm
it's
saying,
there,
you
also
know, to
saying-
circumvent life safety
Yes.
because it's an old building.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not comfortable with that.
potentially.
Um,
okay, well, let's just tear the whole town down. I mean,
Well,
that's what
that's,
you want
that's
to
what,
do.
that's what redevelopment is all
Well,
about. You know, we
yeah,
don't have
but-
to tear it down, but we have to bring it up to a safety standard. Yeah. I mean, right.
But if you got an empty building, it's an empty building, it's an empty building, it's gonna be a homeless encampment or maybe it's gonna be burnt down one day because somebody's sleeping in there and starting a fire, so we want them occupied. And if there's a way to occupy them, you know, with a tiered, okay, fine, you do the staircase and this year and you do this
Because
this
the
year.
point is, if they're occupied unsafely, then we're creating that situation where people are in trouble.
Aren't we talking about roads?
Yeah.
To talk about
Yeah.
interior historic building improvements is the subject.
Okay.
So,
You guys gave us two really good examples right here. I mean, we're talking about a new startup restaurant and we're talking about the county. I mean, we're talking about totally different pockets. We're talking about
Yeah.
totally different uses.
Right.
I mean, this isn't a one and done type thing. I know we all know this. There's just, because you start getting deep on this, you throw those out there and then we alienate half of these businesses that can't come, but we also need to improve. So where is our balance? And I know that's what we're trying to find, but it's not easy.
Well, and we can't say, well, they can afford it, so we're gonna make them do more. than
Absolutely.
Someone else,
Right.
right?
Absolutely.
So
Right.
how do we do it in a way that's fair?
That's fair and reasonable and it
Promotes
encourages
development.
redevelopment
Right.
because you price things out, like I say, I mean, I don't mean to say it like in that way, but just every place has a cap, because we're talking Bothell. I mean, they're in a
Yeah.
different price point. I mean, there's your entry levels in the $700,000 range. So we're,
H Street, the alley example. How, that's one, was that like one block in off of Olympic Highway?
Yes.
yeah. What is it? Is it
Skipworth-
Skipworks used to be there?
Skipworth Plow Shop
Yeah.
used to be there.
It's kind of like.
No, actually, it's
No, it's
behind
One more.
Subway and what do you call it, Parkview Square.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
What's the one?
So commercial residence, so that's interesting.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Olympic Highway is interesting to me because I'm thinking of the north end development in Olympic Highway basically looking like Martin Way.
That's LIC,
And I don't want that.
low intensity commercial zone.
Yeah,
on
like
the
you're gonna have these-
Backside,
You got the trailer park and then you got
correct.
a bunch of commercial with 55
Yes.
driveways and
Yes.
accesses, and then you've got a neighborhood residential and an alleyway. It's just kind of a. Yeah,
Ultimately, yes, that's
And it's
part
gonna
of
be
our
busy.
plan.
it's going to get 10
Left
times
turn lanes
busier.
and lots of accidents.
Yeah, big, wide.
Yeah,
right
it's like
away,
5-lane
et cetera.
highway,
Yeah,
40 miles an hour, it's
we
too
need to address
fast.
that within our comp plan. How that corridor is redeveloped, reimagined, and serve us better.
Yeah, that one's kind of. That particular, so getting back to several slides ago, you had a map of critical pedestrian routes. And you kind of said, you know, at some point, we just have to make the decision, we're just not gonna ever have sidewalks here, we're just not gonna ever have certain improvements in this particular area. I'm kind of liking the idea of of identifying, yeah, I'm just saying, like, I like the idea of identifying areas where we're gonna say, like, it's just, this just doesn't apply. Right, this particular infill
That's what we
does not
would
apply
move
here.
forward with. It'd be
We're
really
not gonna do it,
specific.
it's never gonna happen. You can remodel your house, don't worry about putting in sidewalks, or don't worry about doing that. I'd like to just take those off the table altogether. Right, like this, whatever those are, whatever those areas of the city are that you guys feel like just not feasible, right? Then we can take that off the list and then focus on. Where those redevelopment areas need to be, and we put that together as a project, those redevelopment area projects. And I would say Olympic Highway would be 2 blocks in on Olympic Highway, similar to Railroad, Franklin Coda, whatever. We kind of got like this area where we're gonna focus a project on that. And And then we're gonna do some development, we're gonna do some improvements. As a larger project, and again, depending on other projects that come into that area. I'm a fan of leveraging other growth if we can to do that, but.
So you're suggesting kind of almost that we just make this
Yeah, for streets.
more extensive map, well, no,
Yeah.
this pedestrian map, and
Yeah.
just say, if you're on the map. You build a sidewalk, if you're not, you don't.
Basically.
That would be the
Yeah, simple.
easiest way, I suppose.
That
It's
was
simple,
our
it's over-
proposal, we'll
yeah,
be
it's not
very
over-
specific
we have to
about who it
determine where
applies to
still.
and
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
You still have to modify
It's
the
gotta be-
map.
That's the tough part, right?
Yeah.
Because you may not capture every instance.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You might have grades that are different, you might have, size of lots.
There
whatever
could be a
else.
house built right up to the edge of pavement, and there's no way of sidewalks, we need to drive every one of them and look at things,
Gotta
right?
be
Yeah, you gotta move, you gotta have some options there, like you're saying, some.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
I mean, are you talking more like the whole Mountain View area, all those side streets, there's no sidewalks, all King Street, and all those streets, there's. Is that kind of what you're
There's a
talking
few
about?
sidewalks in the.
No, well, not,
Eric's saying is what's built out there is what's going to be built out
Yeah.
there.
there's probably no infill lots there unless the house burns down.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's,
Yeah.
but like areas like that, you're never gonna have
and that's,
unless.
where we would come to the table with the safe route, because that Mountain View, right, that would make absolute sense for safe routes to schools, right, or.
And the
a
critical
basin.
pedestrian route would already show those projects on it, but if you're not on that
I'm
route.
talking the Capitol Hill example, some of the commercial examples. There's some areas where it's just like. Do we really want commercial at the corner of H in the alley? Like, is that really what the residential neighborhood wants in there? I don't know,
It's a bridge zone, right?
It's-
So
it's kind of a tough-
intensity commercial, so it goes from our general commercial or intensive use, yes, to that bridge zone to the neighborhood residential. Yeah, it's probably out of date,
Yeah.
right? It needs some updating there on how that transition occurs from you busy general commercial to that residential.
But a neighborhood restaurant right there would be awesome.
Yeah,
I mean, that community could support it. There's not a lot up there. I mean, you've got 2 breakfast spots and fast food. I mean, that's the thing though, is you're starting to get into the particulars. I mean, it was a laundromat, which I'm sure served some of the community as well. Especially the large trailer park that's right there.
there's apartments not too far from there.
Yeah,
I know we got into specifics a little bit,
Yeah.
specific projects.
Yeah.
I know these are good examples,
great
but they're not what we want to focus on. We want to focus on, right,
yeah.
the
Yeah.
concept of the lot itself rather than the specific project.
You gave us
because-
good threshold options. I mean, and any of those is a pretty good option.
So I think we have enough to come back with some specific items that we can consider here, draft of code, right? And then I will give you more pictures. How does that code apply to that and that and that? And we can sit there and look at the code and do a little bit more yes, no, add one more of these. And I think probably be able then to bring standards for adoption. So it seems like we got pretty good consensus. So on redevelopment, everyone's okay with some standards. We'll get back to you on what they are, what the thresholds are, the exact thresholds. It appears that the 50% standard sounded pretty good. That's what, we're already using in the building code. We might have a few others, like a trip generation, that sort of thing.
So are we saying there, so if it's valued at 500,000, if they spend $250,000, that's what kicks that in?
Trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple different ones. Give you examples.
And what we've done in instance with building permits is typically it's an estimate, so you take the assessed value, right? And then it's an estimate of the structure only, not the property, right? And then it's what the contractor bid might be, or an estimate from whoever's doing the work.
Because I know
That's how we-
when I opened up Shelton, Texaco up on Lubbock Highway, I had to put in I paved the alley. And that wasn't expected. So do we still have that code?
How they pay in the LIC and GC.
Yeah, next,
What was
Correct.
the trigger because of the 50%?
there was a trailer there. Got rid of it, built that little store.
Okay, well,
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, it would have been a little bit
So
bigger of a
that's
store, but
considered
takes it all the way around it.
considered new construction, I think that is in the general commercial
Yeah.
LIC.
And the
That-
paved
that
alleys
is
for the
a
standard.
requirement right now, in our standards.
That station up on,
That was my first store,
Mountain View.
where the contractor ran off and we had to pay the subcontractors twice.
Oh,
So that is one of our standards that would be provided to a developer with the pre-sub conference. So they would know that up front, what those frontage improvements are required.
I had to plant 2 trees too.
And I think that's the most important thing, and I think everyone at this table has said at some point, that's what we're
There's
looking
no-
for, and so thank you, because it's predictability in the
All-
process,
all
it's
is-
clarity
yeah.
for developers, for staff. We all know what the expectation is going in, there's no surprises, we're not moving the goalposts, it's not if and maybe. We know in this circumstance, this is how we handle it.
Correct.
So I know it's gonna take some work to get there, but I appreciate you guys grinding through, because I think that is one of the biggest values that we can bring to this process is that clarity and consistency, predictability, really, for the process.
You actually have tract developers, when they know what your standards are, they will know I can buy this one because I know the standards. I don't even need to go up to the counter. It's online. I got it. I'm gonna go buy this and I'm moving forward with it. And right now, we can't give that certainty at the counter.
And they'll know the cost.
And they know what the cost is and they do perform it right up front, right? And they know if it's worthwhile or not.
It'd be nice to know during pre-sub how many people actually walk away from projects because of cost. That'd be nice to know, but. I mean, we know that,
I don't know how truthful.
the apartment deal, we know that didn't pencil out.
Well, they went all the way through land use and they got their plan unit development.
Yeah.
But we hope that it's penciled out before they get through land use.
Yeah.
That's our goal, is to work with a developer before they even get to the land use process, because they've now spent a couple $1,000s on a hearing, on that public hearing. So hopefully we've done the research and penciled that project out before they even get to that land use hearing. Most of them have, they've got renderings, elevation, site plan. They've done some preliminary work to develop, some costs at that point. So we hope certainly we get to that point before they actually apply for
I
it.
feel like the holes haven't been in the development as much as this type of stuff, because the development, it's kind of been, you're doing it all. Well, pretty much from
Yeah.
for a while.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're getting,
Redevelopment.
what do you mean I have to do roads? Where as a
Absolutely.
infill lot, it can be a sucker punch people. So a lot of people just buy the lot, and think I'm just gonna build a home there. And then they get told, now you gotta do sidewalks. It doesn't mean they did it the right way, but it's different.
Yeah,
And I do think that Olympia Master Builders would be a good resource for staff on this, because of course they represent Mason County, but they also are working in the other jurisdictions, so they have a pretty good idea of what roadblocks they're running into and kind of, is this completely outside of standard? And I don't think anything we talked about tonight is unreasonable. So I think again, they'll appreciate some predictability and hopefully we see some development moving forward.
So we did go to the code committee this about a year ago, and this is similar to this exact same discussion that we had with them. And it's pretty much, it's falling in line. You were at those. It's falling in line, so pretty much what we were talking
yeah,
about.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And same understanding, right? This is an infill development issue. It's an infill development question. A lot of it, a lot of the conversations circle around that 50%, threshold. There was some, there were some discussions back and forth whether that was an appropriate threshold. But I think that's gonna be, I don't know if you're not gonna have a discussion around an appropriate threshold. If you go to 60% or go down to 30%, there's always gonna be somebody on each side of that line.
Well, today's values, if you go more than 50%, you're building a house.
If
That-
and a little thing on the precept too, if they do it in their feasibility study. It gives them a chance to know the cost, so then they can go back and not kill the project, they can maybe negotiate a different price for the property.
And at the risk of sounding like a broken record,
Yes.
I think that whether it's us as a city or Association of Washington Cities and working with our legislature, we really need to push on the TBD expiration for small communities. That is one of our only funding sources for systematic improvements, and we are quickly seeing that go away. And we've kind of talked about it at the 1,000-foot level, but it's something that I think that AWC needs to take a closer look at, Troy should be working on. That's an easy something that could affect a lot of communities in a really positive way. And
Yeah,
so
we thought it was gonna come up this year, but it didn't.
I think it's needs to be part.
In 20,
No, we thought it would come up last session and it didn't.
when does it expire?
26. So I brought up a couple times about putting larger scale projects together. Fittingly this morning, who was this? Michael Snodgrass from Cantwell's office, Senator Cantwell's office, forward over NOFO for about 5.5 billion in funding to help carry out rural surface transportation projects. 675 million is set aside for rural projects that support and improve and expand surface transportation infrastructure in rural areas, increasing connectivity capacity. The one caveat being is rural funding must be awarded in 25 million or greater amounts. So that's what I'm saying is like, I'm not saying we have a $25 million pavement project in 1 year. Sorry, Jay.
Probably paid the
Yeah.
whole city for that.
But well, you know what I'm saying is like, why aren't we shooting for the moon on some of this stuff and saying like, let's partner up with the county on, you know, major extensions, not major extensions, but larger scale projects that we can get fully funded federal dollars. We're not pursuing this stuff. We haven't in the past. Every time they come and visit, you know, the EDA comes and visit, they're like, this grant, that grant, why aren't you applying for this? Why aren't you applying for that? They're dangling the carrot. Let's look at some larger scale corridor projects and partnering up with others to make that a collective ask and try to knock some of this out in the process of doing that.
Well,
And
that's what we were talking about with, looking, whether it's county, port, whomever, looking some sort of a grant writing position that is funded by multiple entities, because quite frankly, staff is stretched to the point they don't have the capacity for this and we're missing out because of it. So we have to be willing to leverage some of those dollars in order to gain those resources.
100%.
Thank you, Deidre.
You guys did a great job.
I like
This
how
was
you
easy.
took the question, just kind of answered it, got them ironed out, that was helpful.
And defining things for us because we need definitions.
And refresh us.
And the pictures are great because it gets our minds moving on.
Yeah.
It causes us to think of things that we probably shouldn't think about, that is good at the end.
So give us a couple months and we'll be back with some more exacting things and, some better matrices, flow charts, some pictures again, so you can see how they apply. And one more of these sessions and we should be able to wrap it up, at least this subject. And then I'll be coming back to you with actually code revisions, municipal code and engineering standards. And get this wrapped up in the coming months, probably this fall, that sort of thing. Okay.
Sounds good. Awesome. All right, don't get up yet. Look at him, he's like, we got 4 minutes. Does the council have any items for discussion? All right, this meeting is adjourned.